Noor is a guy with the worst job imaginable, cleaning the city's gutters and canals at the crack of dawn. He has to clear out all the junk and replace the wooden covers before sunrise to earn his meager pay. Once that's done, he heads off to a construction site outside the city, where he spends the day hauling heavy sacks and doing back-breaking labor. One afternoon, he hears cries for help from a nearby dungeon and rushes in to find a group of knights trying to protect a tied-up girl from a giant cow monster. Flashback to 15 years earlier in the Northwest Clay's kingdom, where Noor was just a boy doing chores at home. He tended the fire, prepared hot water and tea for his sick mother, and took care of their goats. He promised his mom he wouldn't wander beyond the rock marking their land, and even promised to bring home a wild rabbit for dinner. Before he left, his mother wiped the soot from his face and apologized for being a burden, wishing only for Noor to live the life he desired. That night, Noor made rabbit soup for dinner, but when he brought a bowl to his mother, he found she had passed away. He buried her next to his father and began his life alone. Noor did his best to manage the garden, hunt, care for the animals, and keep the house clean. He even tried to read the dull books left behind. Despite his efforts, he was lonely, with no one to share his meals. One night, while exploring the house, Noor stumbled upon a book that his father used to read to him. It was filled with stories of an adventurer who defeated a giant dragon, learned magic from an old sorcerer, lifted a curse from a dark forest, and obtained a miraculous medicine from the king of the dead. Inspired by his father's tales and his mother's wish for him to live freely, Noor decided to leave his home and become an adventurer. The next day, he left ample food for the animals and visited his parents' graves, promising to become an adventurer like in the stories. Noor stepped beyond the stones marking their land and ventured into the world. After several days, he reached a city and asked the soldiers for directions to the Adventurers Guild. His eyes filled with wonder as he entered civilization for the first time, passing vendors and even spotting an adventurer. At the guild, Noor was initially dismissed by the man at the counter for being too young. However, after explaining that his parents were deceased, the man directed him to the Royal Training School, where he could learn the necessary skills to become an adventurer. Noor eagerly headed to the Academy for Swordsmanship, determined to become a swordsman who could defeat a dragon with a single swing. Training at the Academy was intense, but Noor persevered. He practiced tirelessly, even when others awakened their powers. Despite his efforts, the instructor eventually informed him that he lacked talent for the sword and suggested he try another path. Noor then trained at the Warrior and Tank School, building his muscles and learning to pull weights. But again, he was told that he was not suited for this path. He continued to other schools, including the Hunters, Thieves, Magicians, and Cleric schools. But each time he was informed that he did not have the necessary skills or talents. Disheartened, Noor returned to the Adventurers Guild, where the man was surprised to learn that Noor had not gained any useful skills after 3 months at each school. With a heavy heart, the man had to reject Noor's application to be an adventurer. Noor left the city, his dreams shattered, knowing he was not destined to be an adventurer. Noor returns to his home and heads to his parents' grave, apologizing for failing them. He admits his lack of talents but refuses to give up, deciding to train even harder. He carves a wooden sword and, following his instructor's advice, practices the single skill he knows, hoping to master new ones. Without proper equipment, Noor practices his parrying skills with ropes and sticks, training day and night for a year until he can parry 10 swords in one breath. Despite not unlocking new skills, he remains hopeful as his parrying improves. Over the next 3 years, Noor grows stronger, his training dummies becoming larger and more organized. He can now parry 100 swords in one breath, but still, no new skills emerge. Noor's parrying skill becomes so powerful that a single slash can shake the forest. After 14 years of relentless training, he can parry 1,000 wooden swords at once, but is still unsatisfied with his lack of new skills. Determined, Noor bids farewell to his parents' graves and heads to town. At the Adventurers Guild, he submits a form listing his skills: parry, low heel, stone throw, feather step, and tiny flame. The receptionist suggests training school, but Nor insists he's already been through it. The guildmaster initially doesn't recognize him, but remembers the frail kid from 14 years ago. Despite his incredible parrying ability, Nor is deemed to lack sufficient skills to become an E- ranked adventurer. The guildmaster, however, assigns him the extinct F rank, the lowest rank with many restrictions. Nor accepts this and gets his adventurer license. Overjoyed, he starts taking quests in town, using his skills to become useful to the townspeople. One day, Nor hears a girl's screams from a cave. Rushing to help, he finds a minotaur attacking her. Despite Knight's efforts, they are no match for the monster. Nor uses his parrying skill to distract the monster, allowing the girl to escape, but she's too terrified to move. Nor's sword breaks as he parries another attack, but he ultimately causes the monster's axe to ricochet, decapitating it. The girl thanks Nor, but he humbly walks away without giving his name. Back in the city, he underestimates his achievement, not realizing he defeated a powerful demon minotaur. As the cleanup crew took care of the minotaur and the fallen fighters, Princess Lindbergh felt the weight of their deaths on her shoulders. Her knight dashed to her side, apologizing for not being there in the dungeon. It was her duty to protect Lyn, after all. But Lyn, with a reassuring smile, reminded her that it wasn't her fault. This was supposed to be a basic trial for the right to the throne, and dragging her knight along would have been overkill. Another knight approached, telling Lyn they had to return to the castle because Lord Rain wanted to have a word with her. She already knew the topic, the Minotaur disaster. Back at the castle, Lord Rain was perplexed. The only way a Minotaur could end up in that dungeon was if it had been magically summoned. A knight concurred, pointing out a dead merchant at the scene with a ring bearing an exceptionally pure magic stone, something you don't find at your local market. The knight went on to explain that an A-level demon like a Minotaur isn't just some rich guy's pet. The crest on the ring was from the magical empire of Doritos. Lord Rain had a hunch they were behind it. Leaving such obvious evidence behind was a blatant attempt to bait him into starting a war, giving them an excuse to seize control of the dungeon. Rain is deeply intrigued by the mysterious warrior who saved Lyn. According to reports, this guy took down a Minotaur in seconds with nothing more than a broken sword. Castle spies tried to tail him, but he vanished into thin air. Rain is determined to unmask this enigmatic hero. Meanwhile, Norn returns to the guild, where the guildmaster is shocked to see him alive. Rumor had it a demon popped up in the dungeon near Norn's job site, sparking fears for his safety. Norn explains he was tailed by some shady folks last night, so he slipped away and went home without reporting. The guildmaster tells him he's lucky to be breathing since a Minotaur can obliterate an A-rank adventurer in seconds. Unbeknownst to Norn, the guildmaster is talking about the very Minotaur he defeated. Curious, Norn asks what happened to the beast. The guildmaster mentions it was taken down by some mystery man. Norn, blissfully unaware that he's the mystery man, carries on with his job report. The guildmaster pays him but reminds Norn he'd make more money with a stable job. Norn shrugs it off. Adventuring is his true love, not wealth. Suddenly, Lyn appears, saying she's relieved to finally track him down. She apologizes for the intrusion, explaining she used her long-distance detection skill to find him because she desperately wanted to see him again. Norn assumes she's a thief-class adventurer with detection skills, but Lyn reveals she's a magician with basic skills in all classes. The guild master and patrons begin to recognize Lyn, so she asks Norn if they can talk outside. The guild master grabs Norn, demanding to know what he did to make Lyn seek him out. Norn assures him he's done nothing illegal and won't get into trouble. The guild master reluctantly tells him to go with Lyn and not to do anything stupid. Outside, Lyn uses a concealment skill, apologizing again for the intrusion and acknowledging that a man of his power must be busy. Norn says it's no problem. Lyn thanks him for saving her and many others, but Norn downplays it, calling it taking down a cow and believing Lin could have managed without him, despite witnessing knights get slaughtered by the Minotaur. Lin insists she would have died without his help. Norn, still downplaying his role, finally accepts her thanks. Lin insists on giving him a reward and mentions her father wants to meet him. Norn firmly refuses any reward. Desperate, Lin asks if there's anything she can do for him, even offering him his own territory. Norn remains steadfast. Lin, on the verge of tears, pleads for him to accept her gratitude, refusing to move until he agrees. Norn, recalling a similar tantrum he once threw to get a cleric to train him, reluctantly agrees to meet her father, insisting he wants no extravagant gifts. Lin, overjoyed, tells Norn to stick close so she can use her concealment skills to avoid being seen. Eventually, they arrive at Lin's house. As they enter, Lin asks for Norn's name, which he provides. Realizing he doesn't know her, Lin introduces herself as Lindbergh Clays, usually called Lin. Seeing the grandeur of the house, Norn realizes Lin wasn't kidding about her wealth, explaining the guild master's earlier concern. As they walk, they meet a woman. Lin eagerly asks her about her father, and is told he's in a meeting with Rain. The woman also asks about Norn, and Lin explains he saved her life. The woman offers to lead them to her father. Norn, unfamiliar with royal knights, assumes she's a maid in armor and senses her dislike for him without understanding why. They encounter a man by the window. He notices them and asks the woman, Ians, about their business and Norn's identity. Ians tells Gilbert to put his spear away, as Norn is a guest. Gilbert, realizing Norn is Lin's savior, complies. Ians asks Norn to follow them, needing all the help she can get. Gilbert's poor impression of Norn makes him uneasy, but he follows. In the throne room, the king is in a heated discussion with Rain about Doratus's betrayal. Rain foresaw this, especially after the king of Doratus demanded control of the dungeon, a request that was flatly denied. Since then, the king of Doratus has been plotting their downfall. Lin and company arrive, and Lin excitedly greets her brother and father. Ians and Gilbert kneel, but Norn walks in casually. Rain notices Lin's disguise cloak, indicating she sneaked out. Lin explains she had to find her savior. The king, realizing she means Norn, thanks him formally. Norn, apologizing for his messy state, explains Lin insisted on coming immediately. Norn admits he isn't an aristocrat and might speak rudely, but the king assures him it's fine and prefers casual speech. The king thanks Norn for saving Lin, offering any reward he desires. Norn declines. The king ups the ante to half the dungeon's treasures, but Norn still refuses. Stumped, the king retrieves a valuable sword as a gift. Rain advises against it, but the king insists it's fine, as it's rarely used. Norn reluctantly accepts the sword, sensing its value. The king asks for a demonstration, and Norn's swing generates surprising force, impressing everyone. The king praises Norn's strength and asks him to train Lin. Norn declines, believing Lin should decide for herself. Ready to leave, Norn notes the sword's perfect shape for cleaning gutters, planning to try it out in the morning. Before leaving, Ians apologizes for her earlier rudeness. Norn, understanding her protective duty, accepts. Ians warns him to avoid casual speech with the king in the future. Norn agrees, noting Ians' odd reaction to his name. As he prepares to leave, Gilbert challenges him to a fight. He follows Gilbert to the castle's training room, only to discover Gilbert wants a mock battle. Rick hasn't sparred since his training school days, but he eagerly accepts. Gilbert, a well-known figure in the royal capital, wants to test Rick, the hero who saved Lin. A small crowd gathers, pitying Rick for facing Captain Gilbert. The match begins with Gilbert making the first move, but Rick easily dodges. Gilbert's precise attacks surprise Rick, who wonders about Gilbert's extensive training. However, Rick notices Gilbert's attacks are slow and assumes he's holding back. Rick calls for a timeout, asking Gilbert to stop holding back. Gilbert ramps up the intensity, but Rick still finds the attacks slow and defenseless. Even Gilbert's signature moves are dodged effortlessly by Rick. Gilbert's pride takes a hit when Rick suggests he speeds up even more. Rick starts to realize his solitary training has made him stronger than he thought. Suddenly, Gilbert uses his ultimate skill, but Rick vanishes and reappears beside him, declaring his surrender. Rick heads home, relieved to have escaped before things got worse. Meanwhile, Gilbert's subordinates struggle to justify their captain's failure, but Gilbert knows he lost completely. Gilbert, talented with the spear since childhood, had never found a worthy opponent, leaving him bored despite his growing strength. He traveled the kingdom seeking challengers, but no one could match him. Even when the kingdom called for strong troops due to looming war threats, Gilbert found no worthy adversary. Gilbert's instructor, sensing his boredom, suggested that a stronger adventurer might eventually appear. Gilbert's interest peaked upon hearing about Rick, a man who defeated a minotaur alone. Gilbert respected Rick's casual demeanor with the king, but initially doubted his strength. However, Rick's ability to dodge all of Gilbert's moves, including his supersonic spear strike, convinced Gilbert of Rick's potential. Gilbert realized Rick must have forfeited out of courtesy to avoid embarrassing him. As Rick left, Gilbert noticed unexplained cracks in the floor, evidence of Rick's power. For the first time, Gilbert felt he had found a worthy opponent. Walking home, Rick pondered his foolishness. Despite using his physical enhancement and featherstep abilities, he had barely evaded Gilbert's ultimate attack. Rick believed Gilbert held back just enough to make a point, knowing he wouldn't use a lethal move in a mock battle. Grateful to Gilbert for reminding him of his weaknesses, Rick resolves to train even harder. The next morning, Rick is busy with his usual gutter cleaning job. Using the legendary sword, he's amazed at how effectively it works, leaving the gutters cleaner than ever, and the sword remains unscratched. After finishing, Rick finds himself without work since his construction job is on hold due to a dungeon incident. Restricted to F-rank jobs, he worries about having nothing to do if work in the royal capital dries up, as his goal is to be useful to people. He contemplates starting a boat ride business using the sword as an oar, but realizes he needs a boat. He considers making pizzas, but would need an oven. He even thinks about making a grill out of the sword, but dismisses the idea since he can only produce a flame with his fingertips. Just then, Rick hears rustling in the bushes and turns to find Lynn standing there. She apologizes for showing up unannounced, but explains she couldn't find him at the guild and asked the guild master for his whereabouts. Rick understands, though he didn't provide his exact location, indicating Lynn used her tracking abilities. Rick asks why Lynn is there, and she gets straight to the point. She wants to be his page. Rick has never heard of a page, so Lynn explains it's an unpaid assistant who handles daily tasks in hopes of gaining useful knowledge. She promises not to cause trouble, but Rick refuses. Lynn insists, asking if she has offended him or seems unreliable. Rick reassures her that's not the case, but explains there's nothing for him to teach her, and he doesn't need help with his work. Lynn offers him a huge salary if he becomes her instructor, but Rick, uninterested in money, declines. She even offers herself for any task, but he still refuses, saying he has no tasks for her. Determined, Lynn decides to prove her usefulness by demonstrating her skills. She casts an ice spell, followed by a fire spell to destroy the icicles. She then showcases her highest level of magic and a secret thief class skill called Mist Blade, capable of cutting down a tree with one swing. Finally, she demonstrates her sword skill, sending a powerful divine slash towards Rick, who effortlessly evades it. Lynn believes Rick's evasion implies he is willing to accept her, but he still denies her request. Realizing Lynn thinks highly of him, Rick feels inferior despite her impressive skills. He tries to explain there's nothing he can teach her, but Lynn misinterprets this as him doubting her strength. She asserts her power, acknowledged by all 6 sovereigns, and promises to be useful if he lets her join him. Rick insists she has amazing skills, but they surpass his current abilities. Lynn, speechless, leaves for the day. As she walks home, Lin recalls the story of a boy with no talent who completed all 6 training schools, thought to be a legend. She met this person while studying magic under Oken, the greatest wizard in the world, who showed her the potential of the basic spell Tiny Flame. Despite her efforts, Lin couldn't make her tiny flame grow, realizing it required long-term devotion. Shockingly, Rick had created a massive tiny flame, far exceeding Oken's abilities, through sheer effort. Lin realizes that while her spells are memorized, Rick's power comes from true mastery and humility. Believing Rick is strong in both body and mind, she resolves to learn his secret to strength. Knowing she will soon lead the kingdom alongside her family, Lin is determined to gain Rick's strength. If Rick won't agree to be her instructor, she plans to persistently follow him until he does. Back at the mansion, where the prince is in a royal huff, completely baffled by his father's decision to hand over the legendary Black Blade to some nobody. This sword, found by the king during a dungeon raid with the 6 sovereigns, is made from an unknown material that's tougher than a mother's patience. No matter what they threw at it, not a single scratch appeared, so they dubbed it the indestructible sword. The big mystery is how such an unbreakable weapon got so beat up in the first place. While the prince is annoyed, he kind of gets it, the kingdom's in chaos, and maybe this Noor guy is supposed to shake things up. Meanwhile, Noor and Len are chowing down at a food stand. Noor, still weirded out by having a princess for a student, asks if she's sure it's okay to hang with him. Len shrugs it off, saying she's just an adventurer today and can do whatever she wants. Noor plans to hit the guild afterward, hoping some grunt work will bore her and she'll leave him alone. But judging by her enthusiasm, that plan's a long shot. At the guild master's eyes nearly pop out when he sees Noor with the princess. Len insists on being treated like any other adventurer, and the guild master, recognizing a subplot he doesn't want to be part of, wisely drops the subject. Noor asks for a quest for 2, and thanks to Len's silver B rank, they're cleared for a goblin hunt, a major upgrade from Noor's usual fetch quests. While excited, Noor feels a pang of guilt for using Len's rank and checks if she's cool with it. Len, ever the eager helper, is totally fine, so Noor swallows his doubts and agrees, because hey, dreams don't chase themselves. Sword in hand, Noor almost bolts out the door before remembering he doesn't know where he's going. The guild master, with the patience of a saint, points out their destination on a map, the Forest of Beasts. Their task: bring back goblin ears for payment. If they can't find goblins, medicinal herbs will do. Details sorted, Noor and Lin head to the gatekeepers for a quick info check, and after getting the all clear, they're off on their quest. Upon reaching the Forest of Beasts, Noor is gobsmacked by the dense vegetation, which is nothing like the trees back home. Ever curious, he asks Lin to dish the dirt on goblins. She explains they're usually small-time hunters and gatherers, but can turn nasty if left unchecked. They're crucial to the ecosystem, so they shouldn't be wiped out, even if they're a bit bitey. Impressed by Lin's knowledge, Noor feels like he's the one who should be taking notes. As they venture deeper, Lin uses her search ability, but finds no goblins in sight, confirming the rumors of their dwindling numbers. Instead, she detects a distant monster, and they decide to investigate. Suddenly, the monster's presence vanishes. At the spot, Noor spots a pair of floating legs. Lin's uncover spell reveals a massive goblin. Noor's jaw drops. Lin explains it's a goblin, but forgets to mention that most goblins don't look like they bench press boulders. This beast is a goblin emperor. It picks up trees like they're toothpicks. Lin panics, knowing the emperor's strength, while Noor, with his limited goblin knowledge, thinks it's a walk in the park. Noor's overconfidence impresses Lin, making her think he's a seasoned pro. She decides to fight alongside him. The goblin charges, but Noor parries its strikes like a pro. He instructs Lin to attack while the goblin is stunned. Her spells miss until the goblin starts throwing trees. Noor blocks them, but the goblin tries to overwhelm him by hurling multiple trees. Lin's wind blast saves Noor, but the goblin heals quickly thanks to a mana stone on its head. Nor, channeling his inner action hero, asks Lin to hit his back with a wind blast to catapult him forward. Despite her doubts, Lin agrees. The blast sends Nor flying like a human cannonball. He stabilizes, evades the goblin's attacks, and strikes its forehead, dislodging the Mana Stone. With the goblin weakened, Nor asks Lin to finish it off. She agrees but ends up flambeing it to ashes, so much for a painless end. Quest complete, Nor decides to avoid goblin hunts for a while, realizing goblins are not as easy as he thought. Meanwhile, the prince hears about the Goblin Emperor's defeat and suspects the Magic Empire's meddling. The purity of the Mana Stone worries him, hinting at the holy theocracy of Mithra's involvement. He checks on Lin, relieved she only suffered minor wounds. The goblins cloaking magic and mysterious transport into the kingdom baffle him. With declining goblin numbers prompting an investigation, the prince orders his team to stay vigilant and report any unusual activity. Back at the guild, Nor and Lin report in. The guild master chuckles at Nor's tale, assuming Lin did all the heavy lifting. Nor mentions the Mana Stone, confusing the guild master since regular goblins don't have such bling. Believing it was just a goblin, Nor realizes he has no proof since Lin turned their evidence into a pile of ash. Rai receiving unsettling reports from nearby towns about strange nighttime sounds, frightened animals, and a surge in missing pets. It seems that unnatural monsters have slipped into the nearby forests, prompting Rai to dispatch search parties and put detection specialists on high alert. He also summons the 6 masters from each school because they might need more than just a flashlight and monster repellent. Meanwhile, Nor and Lin are enjoying street food, celebrating the reward Fatty gave them for slaying a goblin proof. After their feast, Lin heads home, leaving Nor relieved at the prospect of some peace and quiet. However, Rai shows up looking for his sister and makes an unexpected request. He wants Nor to join them on a trip to a mountain town the next morning, with Lin along for the ride. Rai is a bit secretive about the mission, but sensing his sincerity, Nor agrees, tempted by the free trip. The next day, Nor hops into a carriage for the first time, enjoying every bump and sway, while Lin looks less than thrilled. When Nor points out the stunning scenery outside, she sighs dramatically, prompting him to wonder if he'll ever be a true adventurer. Lin apologizes for Rai dragging him into this, but he brushes it off, happy for the paycheck. Their mission is to investigate the town of Toros across the mountains. Rai assures them that if nothing happens, it'll be just a paid vacation. As Lin contemplates the hope for peace and quiet, her bodyguard, Annie, reminds her of her duty to keep her safe. In a twist worthy of a soap opera, Rai has secretly assigned Annie a top-secret mission. If danger strikes, she must whisk Lin away to the holy kingdom of Mithra. Annie is shocked to realize Lin is unaware of the looming threat, but Rai thinks it's best to keep her in the dark, who wants to spoil the surprise. During a break, Annie apologizes to Nor for dragging him into this situation. She promises to keep him safe, but Nor quips, "No need for that. I'm pretty good at running away." Annie insists he won't need to flee as long as she has her shield, and when Nor expresses doubt, she demonstrates her holy shield ability. Impressed, he recalls Lin mentioning Annie is on par with Gil, a legendary dragon slayer. Feeling a bit outmatched, especially after barely surviving a goblin fight, he thanks Annie for her skills. This prompts Annie to reflect on her past. Once an orphan, she discovered her powers when a curious friend got too close and was hurt. Caretakers summoned a magician, a warrior, and a priest to evaluate her, and the magician declared her gift a blessing from heaven. He explained that her power could be either a sword or a shield, depending on how she chose to wield it. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her, but a red-headed warrior stepped in to train her. As she trained, Annie distanced herself from her peers, fearing she might harm them. That changed when she met Nor, whose name frequently came up in her master's stories, creating an unexpected bond. Ever since meeting Nor, that jealousy has only grown, and she wants to shake it off to protect Lin without any weaknesses. Just then, Noor spots movement in the wheat fields and convinces the group to stop the carriage. Using her magic to reveal what's lurking, Lin uncovers a giant frog-bat hybrid monster. Meanwhile, chaos erupts in the capital as numerous monsters attack, prompting Rai to command the warriors, swordsmen, and hunters to engage while the thieves help evacuate civilians. King Clay recalls Emperor Derry's warning that they would regret not accepting his conditions and suspects Derry is behind this attack. Rai agrees, believing this is just the beginning of something much worse. Meanwhile, with Lin and the team, after she casts her reveal spell, a little boy suddenly appears next to the Black Death Dragon and immediately recognizes it. Before anyone can process this, the dragon goes in for the squish, and Noor doesn't hesitate, he leaps in to save the kid. As Noor parries the dragon's strike, Annie points out that the boy's sudden appearance means he was also concealed by the spell. This can only mean one thing: he's demon kin. Lin recalls that demon kin, nearly identical to humans, can bond with monsters and are viewed as abominations due to their role in nearly destroying Mithra 200 years ago. Annie is shocked that Noor would help an enemy, but Lin insists they need to save him. Meanwhile, Noor holds off the frog, thinking it's weaker than the goblin he fought, so he just needs to stall until help arrives. But then the frog unleashes a toxic gas. Noor decides to parry it to protect the boy, but this backfires, poisoning him badly. As Noor collapses, Lin wants to help but is stopped by Annie, who warns that the next wave of poison will be even worse. With even the world's greatest healer unable to save him from the Black Death Dragon's poison, Annie shields Lin from harm. Lin tries to purify the poison, but it's not enough. She's heartbroken over leaving Noor to die, but then sees him still fighting, blood pouring from his eyes. It hits her why Dandel admires his will to protect others, even at the cost of his own life. Yet, in a moment of grim optimism, he mutters, "This is good," hinting he's got a plan to defeat the frog. Talk about going out with a bang. Flashback to a demon-kin child and his fellow cursed kids were born with the unfortunate gift of monster control. Once a handy trick for herding livestock, this power turned into a big no-no after someone got creative and used it in a war. Naturally, the world responded with its signature compassion by locking them up, feeding them meals that only a compost heap could love, and dishing out daily beatings as if they were a limited-time offer. The demon-kin boy had it even worse. Born with the ability to read minds, he was treated to an extra dose of misery by hearing every nasty thought the townsfolk had about him. Yet, even with all this torment, the thought of revenge never crossed his mind. No, he preferred to endure his suffering quietly, with the stoicism of someone who knew complaining would only make things worse. Then one day, his captor decided it was time to put the boy's powers to more sinister use, unleashing monsters on a neighboring kingdom. The incentive: fewer beatings and slightly less moldy bread. The threat: more pain, a prospect the boy had mistakenly thought had already reached its peak. Lacking the ability to read his captor's mind due to a magical gadget, the boy agreed, driven by sheer self-preservation. But things didn't go as planned. In the middle of the mission, the boy lost control of the monster, which promptly broke free. Panic set in as he realized he had botched the job, likely dooming his fellow demon kin to even worse fates. However, there was a small silver lining: at least he wouldn't have to become a killer. As death loomed, he couldn't help but wish that in his next life, he might have a kind family and maybe, just maybe, a decent meal. Enter Noor, the kingdom's least likely hero. He swooped in to save the boy, much to the child's confusion. Why would someone from the kingdom risk their life for him? Both were hit with the monster's poison, but instead of healing himself, Noor used his magic to save the boy. Of course, this heroic act meant Noor soon collapsed from the poison, but not before channeling some serious self-confidence, which had roots in a childhood full of, let's just say, questionable decisions. Flashback to Noor's childhood. After his mother's death, he tried his hand at cooking with herbs he'd gathered from the forest. Unfortunately, he included dragon ruin, a plant his mom had explicitly warned him to avoid. The resulting soup was more of a death potion, but Noor managed to survive, thanks to sheer stubbornness and a little low-level healing magic. Noor, however, wasn't one to learn quickly from mistakes. Barely surviving the poison soup, he continued his training outside, only to get bitten by a poison spike snake. As if his luck wasn't bad enough, this snake was known for its deadly venom. Yet, in typical Noor fashion, he passed out. Later, Noor seems miraculously fine. He's amazed he survived but decides to bring the snake home and cook it up, reasoning that if he survived its bite, what's the worst that could happen from eating it? For once, he's right, the snake's poison has no effect on him, and the meat is surprisingly delicious. The next day, Noor decides to put his newfound theory to the test. He finds another poison spike snake and lets it bite him, curious to see what happens. Just as Noor suspected, the venom was spreading through his body much slower than the day before. Excitedly, he thought he must have developed some kind of poison resistance, his ticket to unlocking a new skill. So, he began hunting for poisonous snacks, convinced that indulging in toxic treats would lead to his big breakthrough. Sure, he occasionally collapsed from a poison overdose, but what's a little blood loss for the sake of culinary experimentation? While he never gained any poison-related skills, he found himself developing a surprising taste for toxic delicacies. Even when a monstrous frog loomed over him, all he could think about was how delicious it would taste after he defeated it. The frog tried to squish him, but Noor executed a perfect backflip to dodge the attack. Initially, the frog's powerful poison knocked him down for a moment, but he quickly built up immunity. As they fought, Noor shattered the frog's claws and delivered a well-timed strike that broke its teeth. Realizing it was losing, the frog charged up a massive poison blast. But to Noor, it was just an opportunity for a free meal. Before the frog could unleash its toxic power, Noor slammed its mouth shut, causing a spectacular explosion of frog guts and poison. Feeling victorious, Noor couldn't help but wonder how such a toxic creature ended up in this field. Suddenly, he remembered the kid behind him and turned to check on him. The boy assured him he was fine, though he looked a bit pale, and mentioned needing healing from Lin after the chaos. When Noor asked what the kid was doing out here, he sheepishly admitted he had brought the frog, promising to deliver it to the city. Noor's mind started racing. This kid must be a frog farmer, desperately protecting his precious poisonous meat. Feeling guilty about ruining the boy's delivery, Noor offered to pay him back over the years, but the boy waved it off, saying it didn't matter. Curious, Noor asked how a kid like him managed to wrangle such a monster, leading the boy to reveal he had the ability to control monsters, something he was born with. Impressed, Noor began to imagine how useful that power could be. When the boy broke down in tears, overwhelmed that someone found his abilities useful, Noor saw a bit of himself in him and assured him he had a bright future ahead. Just then, the others arrived, and Lin insisted on healing Noor, who was still basking in the glow of victory. She couldn't believe he survived a hit from the Black Death Dragon, known for its lethal poison. Lin recalled a technique called Sacred Spirit, which took years to master, yet here was Noor, seemingly achieving it in record time without even knowing it. As Lin processed this revelation, she realized the boy was Demonkin, a race usually met with distrust. But Noor thought nothing of it and offered the boy a ride in their carriage. Lin hesitated, reminding Noor that Demonkin were often treated as enemies, especially since the boy had inadvertently caused a mess. But Noor felt compelled to help, remembering the boy's determination to deliver the frog. When he asked about the person he was supposed to deliver it to, the boy admitted he had no clue, as he was blindfolded during the journey. Lin realized the boy had likely been forced into this situation and decided they should help him. However, there was a significant problem. Demonkin were banned from entering Mithra. Just then, a mysterious man appeared, surprised to see the boy alive, as he had expected Rollo to have met his end. The man quickly realizing that Rollo had botched the delivery of the frog. Observing the man's knowledge of the mission, Noor asks if he was the one who had sent Rollo. But the man denied it, explaining he was merely hired to take out Rollo and help finish the mission. He then asked if Noor had killed the frog, to which Noor sheepishly admitted, still thinking the frog was meant for dinner. The man, however, didn't care about the frog. His focus was solely on Rollo. Noor began to piece together that the man was after Rollo, but it was clear his intentions were far from friendly. In a blink, the man vanished and reappeared behind them, striking out of nowhere. Noor barely managed to parry the attack, confused by the sudden hostility, while the man, seeing Noor wasn't going to be an easy target, took a step back and calmly asked if Noor would hand over Rollo without a fight. He revealed that Rollo was worth a lot of money, but only if he was dead. Seeing that Noor wouldn't just let him kill Rollo, the man attacked again. Noor couldn't understand why the man wanted Rollo dead, so the man explained, with growing impatience, that his client would kill Rollo even if he brought him back alive. In his mind, he was doing Rollo a favor by ending it quickly. But Noor still didn't get it. Exasperated, the man gave up trying to explain and lunged for Rollo. But Noor matched his speed, sending the assassin flying and shattering his dagger. Both moved so fast that Lin could barely keep up, while Anne had to stay close to her to shield her from the chaos. The assassin, increasingly annoyed by Noor's tenacity, pulled out more daggers and unleashed a flurry of strikes. But Noor blocked every single one, steadily pushing the assassin back. Realizing Noor was a serious problem, the assassin decided it was time to kill him for real. He charged at Noor with blinding speed, aiming for his face, but Noor deflected the blow, though the force sent him skidding back. Regaining his footing, Noor commented on the surprising power behind such a small knife, and the assassin was shocked that Noor had managed to block the attack. Anne, recognizing the assassin's technique, realized he was Zadu, a former S-rank adventurer known as the Deadman. She remembered reading about Zadu, who had once casually strolled into a meeting with all the sovereigns, sparking her curiosity. Zadu had been officially declared dead after becoming a wanted man for his crimes, including wiping out 36 members of a merchant family. His strength was so terrifying that no one dared to hunt him down, and the matter was quietly swept under the rug. Zadu was infamous for taking any job, no matter how vile, as long as it paid well. He had even destroyed an entire country, single-handedly slaughtering its army and royal family on a client's whim. To avoid further bloodshed, the guild pretended Zadu was dead so no one would try to go after him again. Back in the present, Zadu, growing more frustrated with each broken dagger, was nearly out of weapons. Noor apologized for shattering them, but Zadu wasn't interested in apologies. He found it odd that his daggers kept breaking, considering they were forged from orichalcum and dragon tusk materials that should have made them nearly indestructible. Zadu couldn't tear his eyes away from Noor's sword. It was truly something out of a legend. Sensing things were about to go south, he decided to pull out all the stops. He flung his ultimate weapon into the air, and it burst into a blinding flash, filling the sky with thousands of razor-sharp blades aimed directly at Noor. No matter how many Noor shattered, Zadu just kept conjuring more. Overwhelmed by the relentless assault, Noor had no choice but to take some hits while shielding Rollo, and, watching from the sidelines, was torn between jumping in to help or sticking to her mission of keeping Lin safe. After a moment's thought, she decided to take the risk. Noor's strength was crucial for their survival. At the last moment, En swooped in, blocking the deadly hail of blades with her shield. She launched a counterattack, but Zadu's blades dodged every effort. Frustrated, she called on Noor for backup. She could handle the defense, but she needed his speed to take down Zadu. Noor hesitated. Could he really keep up with blades moving this fast? But he remembered his success at swatting birds even quicker than these blades. He grabbed a broken claw from the frog and hatched a plan. On his signal, En dropped the shield, giving Noor a clear shot. With dragon scales in hand, he turned his arm into a makeshift missile launcher, blasting away the incoming blades. As En raised the shield again, Noor kept up his assault, reducing Zadu's arsenal to scrap. Just when it seemed like they were gaining ground, Zadu tried a sneaky move, aiming to stab N in the eye. Noor, ever the quick reactor, parried the strike, breaking yet another of Zadu's adamantite daggers. Zadu was flummoxed. How was Noor not only keeping up with but breaking his weapons? Noor, ever the polite fighter, apologized for the destruction, but pointed out it was Zadu's fault for attacking in the first place. Zadu, less interested in apologies and more in the cost of his lost daggers, decided he'd had enough. With so many blades destroyed and no prospect of winning, he decided to cut his losses and abandon the bounty on Rollo. Before leaving, he mentioned something interesting brewing in the kingdom, sparking N's curiosity. But Zadu didn't have details, only that it would be a spectacular show. He threw one last attack, but Noor, as usual, blocked it with ease. Realizing that Noor was the real deal, Zadu vanished with a teleportation spell, leaving them to regroup. With Zadu gone, Noor sighed in relief, but Lin was still anxious about the mysterious event Zadu hinted at. Noor suggested heading back to the capital to investigate, but Rollo started trembling in fear. He'd overheard his captors talking about a terrifying monster headed for the capital, one that would make even the Black Death Dragon look like a harmless frog. Lin insisted they head back immediately, realizing the situation was worse than she thought. She asked Noor to join her, and he agreed, and reluctantly consented to return but made Lin promise to stay close. Rollo, feeling responsible, offered to help as well. Noor patted him on the head, and Lin noticed the deep look on Noor's face, thinking he was having a moment of profound reflection. In truth, Noor was just regretting he never got to taste the poison frog. Meanwhile, back at the capital, the city was in tatters, but thanks to the 6 sovereigns, they managed to hold the line. The problem now was Rain couldn't predict where the next attack would come from. It could be from any direction, or even from above. Though reports indicated no flying beasts nearby, Rain spotted something in the sky. With a quick uncover spell, he saw, to his horror, a dragon of calamity looming over the city. Flashback. The hero in Noor's storybook had earned the esteemed title of Dragon Slayer after vanquishing a dragon so evil it probably had "destroy all life" on its daily to-do list. Young Noor was so impressed by this tale that he boldly declared he wanted to slay a dragon too. His father, however, quickly deflated Noor's ambitions with a reality check. Slaying dragons is no walk in the park. Some dragons are ancient, ridiculously powerful, and could level a mountain or flatten a continent just for fun. Fast forward to the present, where Noor and his crew are heading back to the capital when Noor gets a feeling, one of those feelings. While the others are blissfully unaware, Noor's monster radar is on full alert. He points out where the trouble is coming from, and just as everyone's about to call him paranoid, the Dragon of Calamity makes a grand entrance. As panic spreads like wildfire, Rain, one of Noor's companions, can't believe the Empire has actually unleashed this oversized lizard just because they didn't get their way. The Dragon of Calamity, according to the history books, should still be in hibernation, dreaming about terrorizing future generations. But no, someone decided to play alarm clock and set it on a path to demolish the kingdom. Rain orders an immediate evacuation, but the Bee Sovereign, perched on a rooftop, senses some magical mischief afoot. Someone's blocked the exits to keep the sovereigns busy while the dragon does its worst. Meanwhile, the king is channeling his inner stoic as he watches doom approach. Gilbert, his advisor, practically begs him to leave, but the king is all about duty over safety, sending Gilbert to help the citizens instead. You know, typical king stuff. Ames, another member of the group, watches the dragon's aerial show, fully aware that the capital's about to become a historical footnote. She hopes the evacuation is in full swing, but Lin, who knows her dad better than anyone, realizes he'll be the last one out if he leaves at all. He's probably planning to play hero. While everyone else is losing their cool, Noor is absolutely starstruck. This is his first time seeing a real dragon. The other one was just a glorified farm frog, in his opinion. But when he asks Lin about her father and brother, and she confirms they're still in the capital, Noor decides it's time to step up. The capital is nearly 100 kilometers away, and it's about to get a lot closer to ground zero, but Noor isn't fazed. He figures he can make it there if he runs no biggie, right? Lin's jaw practically hits the floor. The capital is hours away at a normal pace, and they've only got minutes. But Noor suggests using the same trick they pulled against the goblin in the forest. Lin should hit him with her strongest wind blast, and he'll handle the rest. It's a crazy idea, but if anyone can pull off crazy, it's Noor. With no time to lose, Lin gets her game face on and prepares to blast Noor at speeds that would make a rocket jealous. Back in the capital, the king is having flashbacks to his showdown with the emperor. The emperor wanted a dungeon so powerful it could change the world, but the king thought meddling with it was a one-way ticket to disaster. Well, disaster has RSVP'd, and it's arriving on dragon wings. The king, feeling more like a soldier than a ruler, is ready to face the music and the dragon head-on. He's got one goal: take out at least one of the dragon's eyes before the curtain falls. Meanwhile, Indin uses her divine shield to set up the world's most intense slingshot, readying Noor for his high-speed launch. Noor's confidence is starting to waver as he realizes just how dangerous this is. But before he can say, wait, Lin fires off her six-fold wind blast, sending Noor rocketing toward the capital faster than you can say Dragon Slayer. As the dragon hones in on the king, Noor is en route, proving that when it comes to crazy plans, it's go big or go home. As the dragon charges up its legendary dragon's breath, the same flame that once turned a continent into toast, the king, realizing he's about to become extra crispy, decides that if he's going out with a bang. He whips out his blast sword, which channels all his mana into one epic strike, but at the cost of his life. It's a classic, this is how legends die moment. But just as the king is about to make his grand exit, Noor rockets in from out of nowhere and parries the dragon's face because why not? Sending the dragon's breath shooting harmlessly into the sky and the dragon itself crashing to the ground. The dragon, now dazed and confused, tries to figure out what in the world just happened. When it spots Noor, it naturally assumes he's the culprit. So, the dragon tries to flatten him with its tail, but Noor, in full not today mode, parries that too, sending the dragon crashing down again. Noor, who thought he was about to be the next human pancake after Lin launched him here, woke up just in time to take control of the situation, using his enhanced abilities to vault over the castle walls. His landing could use some work, though, since he ended up body slamming the dragon. Now that he's face to face with this supposed nation-ending calamity, Noor can't help but wonder why everyone's been making such a fuss. He's pretty sure Lin's wind blast was scarier. Feeling confident, he gets ready to turn this dragon into a giant, scaly piñata. Meanwhile, Lin and Indin arrive at the capital, laser focused on saving the king while Noor plays Whack-A-Dragon. But before they can do anything, a chunk of debris comes flying their way. Lin hits the ground, but Indin, ever the quick thinker, throws up a shield just in time. Lin, catching her breath, looks ahead and spots a gang of goblin emperors charging toward them. Sure, they're smaller than the one she and Noor fought in the forest, but they're still not exactly friendly. Lin channels her inner Noor, reminding herself these are just goblins in fancy hats, so they should be easy pickings. As the goblins charge, Lin tries to slow them down with some ice magic, but they're quicker than she expected. That's when Rollo steps up, pulling a Jedi mind trick to freeze the goblins in their tracks. Lin takes the hint, encasing them in ice, while Indin materializes a sword and slices them into goblin sushi. Crisis averted. Lin's beyond impressed. Indin's not just the divine shield, she's the divine sword too. And Rollo, well, stopping a bunch of goblin emperors with a few words is next level cool. Back to the dragon, which is now having what can only be described as an identity crisis. This tiny human is parrying everything it throws, and to make matters worse, Noor is actually chipping away at its supposedly indestructible scales and claws. Nor, meanwhile, is pretty stoked that his sword hasn't even gotten a scratch, and starts wondering if it's made of some kind of unbreakable space metal. Realizing it's getting nowhere with brute force, the dragon switches tactics. It soars into the air, charges up another dragon's breath, and fires it straight at Nor, thinking there's no way he can parry this one. But of course, Nor just swats it away like it's nothing. At this point, the dragon is flabbergasted. Did this guy really just parry a nuclear blast? Rollo can sense the dragon's frustration. It's throwing everything it's got, but Nor isn't even breaking a sweat. For a creature with an ego as big as its wingspan, being outdone by a human the size of a snack is a serious blow. Desperate to save face, the dragon makes one last, desperate lunge at Nor. But Nor, probably stifling a yawn at this point, parries the attack again, this time breaking one of the dragon's claws in the process. That's when it hits the dragon. It's outmatched. Admitting defeat, the dragon slumps to the ground and submits to Nor. The crowd is in stunned silence, and Nor himself is a bit confused about what just happened. But hey, a win's a win. He remembers the hero from his childhood story, who slayed a dragon and brought prosperity to the land with its remains. But even though this dragon has caused quite the mess, Nor just can't bring himself to kill it. Instead, he plops down in front of it, calling it a day. With the group huddling around Nor, worried he might be down for the count, but he waves them off, claiming he's perfectly fine. In fact, he's had an epiphany, all thanks to Rollo. The boy, completely lost, asks what he means, and Nor explains how the dragon calmed down exactly as predicted. But Rollo, with a shrug, insists he had nothing to do with it, leaving Nor scratching his head. He had assumed Rollo had flexed his powers to tame the beast, but Rollo denies it, reminding Nor of his earlier fear of revealing his abilities, lest he be judged. Nor drops the topic, instead asking if Rollo can kindly send the dragon back to where it came from. Before Rollo can answer, Lin jumps in, warning that letting a beast like that roam free is like playing with fire. Nor gets it. It'd be simpler to end the dragon then and there, but he's got a soft spot for the scaly guy. Lin reluctantly agrees to let it live and turns to Rollo, asking if he can manage to send the creature packing. Rollo, hesitant, says the best he can do is politely ask it to leave. Nor steps up, giving Rollo a pep talk about how neither In nor Lin are scared of his powers, boosting Rollo's confidence. Rollo begins his spell, but halfway through, he freezes. Nor, slightly panicked, asks if there's a hiccup, only to learn that the dragon's just waiting for Rollo's command. Nor suggests the obvious, ask the dragon nicely to go home and quit terrorizing humanity. Rollo gives it a shot, and the dragon, ever obedient, takes off. But just when things seem wrapped up, a lightning bolt strikes the dragon mid-flight, sending it crashing down. From a nearby cliff, Darius chuckles, because even an ancient dragon is just another piece on his chessboard. Wasting no time, he orders his troops to launch an attack on the capital, unleashing a horde of soldiers armed with cutting-edge magic tech. Rewind a few days, Darius had unleashed the Calamity Dragon to soften up Clay's kingdom as part of his grand plan. His army, dripping with magical weapons and high-tech armor, was ready to storm the ravaged city. Darius, drunk on his own genius, brushed off any dissent. He was certain his firepower would spell doom for his enemies. Watching his plan unfold, Darius pictures himself immortalized in history as the conqueror of a kingdom too arrogant to see its downfall coming. Meanwhile, Rollo leads Nor and the gang to the fallen dragon, hoping it's still breathing. Lin points out Darius's army stationed on a cliff, and one sharp-eyed soldier spots Princess Lin and her protector, the Divine Shield. Darius, recognizing a legendary figure when he sees one, sees the perfect chance to snuff out an era of heroes. He commands his cannon to fire, eager to make in the latest in his list of legendary casualties. In sensing danger, orders Lin to grab Rollo and run. As the cannon fires, Nor steps up like a champ, deflecting the massive blast with a thunderous counter. Darius was trying to wrap his head around what had just gone wrong when one of his soldiers nervously suggested that Bian's ignition might have had a hiccup. Doris, not one for excuses, immediately barked for another shot. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Nor was busy squinting at the enemy's firepower, wondering just what kind of crazy weaponry they were up against. Lady Lindbergh chimed in, explaining that Dara's Roman III had rallied about 10,000 troops, all primed and ready to steamroll them. Sure, Claz had its own army, but they were basically bringing knives to a cannon fight. Knowing they were seriously outmatched, declared that they'd fall back to her brother, Lord Rain, but not before dealing with the mess trying to wipe them off the map. As cannon blasts hurtled their way, the Divine Shield sprang into action, throwing up a dazzling array of magical barriers that could be seen for miles. Darius, watching from his perch, was not amused. His supposedly unstoppable cannons were more like fireworks at this point. One of his men suggested he take cover in the rear, and after a bit of grumbling, Darius reluctantly backed off, but kept the attack going. Nor figured the enemy planned to keep them boxed in until they were toast, but he was sure there was a way out. He declared he'd pull a grand diversion to draw the Magic Empire's attention and buy the others time to scram. Lynn, understandably worried her mentor was about to play a very dangerous game of tag, hesitated, but Nor was all in. As he psyched himself up, he recalled his childhood of poking beehives and outrunning swarms of bees. If he could outrun angry insects, he could outrun an army, right? He reassured the group that he'd be back in one piece, so no need to stress. Lynn reluctantly agreed, but decided to give Nor a boost before his wild dash. She reached out her hands, holding them near him in silence. Nor, a bit baffled, wondered if she was gearing up some kind of defensive magic. But before he could ask, In told him to brace for impact. Confused, Nor turned, thinking his own teammate might accidentally zap him before he even started. Meanwhile, the Bean cannon began charging up another shot, and Nor braced himself for whatever crazy plan was about to unfold. Nor didn't exactly feel battle ready, so he went for plan B, enchant his legs and make a break for it. But before he could get too far, Lin gave him an extra kick, a gust of wind that sent him rocketing forward like a human cannonball, narrowly dodging death. Nor barreled through In's divine shield, only to find himself smack in the middle of a mana missile storm aimed at his crew. With some quick reflexes and his trusty parry skill, he deflected a few dozen shots, turning his frantic sprint into an impromptu dodgeball game with deadly stakes. Momentum on his side, Nor's only option was to keep running fast. He tore across the battlefield at a speed that would put a cheetah to shame, crashing into enemy lines and disarming soldiers with lightning-fast parries before they could even blink. Every second he held the front meant more time for Lin and the others to make their getaway, so Nor kept his foot on the gas, fighting and fleeing in equal measure. Doris, watching from his hilltop, looked on in utter disbelief as swords and shields went flying, seemingly propelled by some lunatic who had mistaken the battlefield for his personal playground. Moments later, that very lunatic Nor launched himself to the top of the precipice with a jump that defied all physics, landing right in front of the bewildered king. Down below, Darius's troops could only gape as their once trusty weapons came crashing back to earth, raining down like an ironic twist of fate. Nor wasn't done with his impromptu gymnastics routine, though. With a display of brute strength, he sent mana-generating Aegis devices soaring like frisbees and whipped up tornadoes just by blitzing through enemy ranks, turning Darius into one of the many victims of his wild charge. Dazed and furious, Darius got back up, only to see his supposedly invincible army getting steamrolled by a single man who had sprinted across half the battlefield in record time. Nor, seemingly out of breath, finally paused before the king, ignoring everyone else as if Darius were the main act of his one-man show. The king, now thoroughly rattled, tried to remember where he'd left his dignity. He unsheathed his orichalcum sword, clung to his fancy Kaiser armor, and did his best to look menacing, but his trembling hands were giving away the fact that he was scared senseless. Nor, unfazed, hoisted up the 4 Bean cannons and nearly dropped them on Darius's head, as if casually rearranging the battlefield. The king's mind was spinning. How had one man turned his entire army into a circus act? Then Darius's eyes caught sight of Nor's sword, triggering a flashback. He remembered ogling that black sword in the throne room of Claz, the legendary relic so heavy that even King Claz could barely lift it. And here was Nor, swinging it around like it was a prop in a school play. With that realization, Darius's bravado crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. In pure terror, he wet himself, scrambled onto his horse, and bolted, deciding that maybe this battlefield wasn't so much his empire as it was Nor's playground. From Nor's point of view, the battlefield was a circus of chaos with a side of confusion. Amidst the clashing swords and thundering magic, one figure stood out, a flashy old guy decked out in golden armor. This was the Emperor, staring at Nor like he couldn't decide if Nor was a problem or just a bad dream. But Nor didn't have time to figure it out. The battle was popping off, and he had bigger fish to fry. Job number 1. Keep those pesky soldiers from grabbing their weapons. Nor whipped out his parry skill, keeping swords, shields, and all sorts of deadly gear floating in the air like some twisted magic show. The Empire had also rolled in with weird, clunky machines that looked like they were built for a sci-fi movie. Nor didn't know what they did, but whatever it was, it couldn't be good. So, he made them part of his floating collection too. But even as Nor worked his magic, he couldn't stop thinking about the Emperor. Why was this golden geezer here? Suddenly, Dars, a guy Nor vaguely remembered, made a comment like he already knew Nor, adding a layer of "what the heck" to the mix. As Nor drifted closer to the Emperor, he felt zero danger, which just made the whole thing even weirder. He shrugged and got back to his job, keeping the enemy's stuff airborne. Nor glanced back at the Emperor, who looked like he was trying to solve a riddle he didn't have the clues for. Was Nor a threat or just an annoying fly buzzing around? To look less like a problem, Nor rested his sword casually on his shoulder and threw in a smile for good measure. The result? The Emperor freaked out, sprinted to his horse, and fled like he was late for a meeting. Just then, Nor's body gave him a not-so-friendly reminder that he wasn't invincible. Blood in his mouth, legs like jelly, and enemies closing in, he hoped his pals were making a clean getaway. But before he could spiral into doom and gloom, he heard a familiar voice shout her falling star move. It was Mayan, the archer, saving the day with her usual flair. Seconds later, another figure unleashed their drag RVE technique, and Nor knew it had to be Gilbert, right on cue. Sig, Gilbert's mentor, showed up to thank Nor, assuring him that the rest was in capable hands. Then Sig charged off like a tornado, pulling off his thousand blades technique, cutting through enemy ranks as if they were butter. Nor watched with a mix of admiration and nostalgia, remembering when he dreamed of being that kind of warrior as a kid. Off to the side, S was busy being the buzzkill, griping about the sovereigns causing too much havoc. Oken, ever the realist, argued that holding back wasn't exactly an option against an army this size. San chimed in, pointing out that dead soldiers don't make great informants. Switching gears, Oken called up a posse of sorcerers to cast Earth Bond, turning the battlefield into a tangle of roots that trapped enemy soldiers in a botanical nightmare. Meanwhile, Dandel and his crew made a grand entrance elsewhere, causing a ruckus and kicking up enough dust to make it look like a sandstorm. Oken, always a fan of a good fight, watched with a twinkle in his eye. He cast Stone Prison, boxing the enemy in with towering rock walls. As the dust settled, the Sovereign of Salvation swooped in with healers to patch up the survivors. Nor spotted familiar faces among them, his old instructors from back in the day, and couldn't hide his smile at the impromptu reunion. From their perch on a stone barrier, Mayan and Karu caught sight of Nor, and as things quieted down, Lin hurried over to heal him. She told him to take it easy, but Nor felt fine, except for a sudden hunger pang that reminded him he hadn't eaten. Sig delivered the latest intel. An enemy officer had spilled the beans under pressure, confirming that no reinforcements were coming. The Empire had thrown everything into this fight, including dragons and other nasties that were already causing chaos in the capital. Reflecting on the battle, Nor noted that the Emperor had taken off, prompting Oaken to express his surprise that the old man had shown up at all. Nor's curiosity piqued was Oaken talking about that lost old guy. The mage explained that the Emperor's armor was made of orichalcum, a metal that could shrug off any attack but couldn't fix his dreadful fashion sense. Sig suggested they could still catch Duritz at the border fortress with the ravine bridge, but Oaken warned that catching the Emperor was as likely as pigs flying unless, of course, they actually could fly. Nor casually threw out that it might be doable if the dragon was still kicking, leading the crew to the Calamity Dragon. Oaken, witnessing the dragon's grandeur, had the look of a kid seeing fireworks for the first time, while San felt like he'd just won a medal for getting to heal such a legendary beast. San got to work reviving the dragon, all the while commenting on how much Nor had grown. Oaken was startled to hear Nor's name, remembering he'd once been the kid's teacher. Nor, always cheeky, teased Oaken about still being spry, to which the mage puffed his chest and claimed he had 100 more years in him if the universe would just play along. Nor chuckled, calling the mage's jokes timeless, though Oaken huffed that he was dead serious. Oaken asked if they were seriously planning to ride the dragon. Nor, all confidence, reassured him they had Rollo. The mage eyed the demon folk skeptically, but Nor just shrugged. Right on cue, the dragon opened its eyes, roared deafeningly, and prepared to launch. Nor declared it was go time, surprised when Lin and Inns hopped aboard too. He'd thought this was a sovereign's only gig. Lin explained that Rollo needed to bond with the dragon, and she and In were there to protect him. They assumed Nor was coming, too. Terrified of heights, but determined not to back out of his own plan, Nor reluctantly agreed. Karu, the stealthy shadow sovereign, initially opted out, not wanting to spook anyone. But Nor, recognizing his old mentor, nudged him to join, and Karu finally agreed, knowing his skills were invaluable. Nor asked Insei if he was keeping an eye on the stone prison. The mage nodded, bound to his duty. Lord Rain arrived with the King of Clays, making Lin smile and sweat nervously, fearing reprimand. Instead, her brother admitted his orders were misguided and was just relieved they were safe. With pep talks done, Rollo commanded the dragon to take flight. Meanwhile, Dandel and Sig observed from a distance, debating if Nor needed guidance. Sig believed Nor never did. He was a hero straight out of legend. Watching Nor's battlefield prowess, they couldn't help but feel inspired. As they soared, Rain grew anxious about Duritz reaching his fortress. Karu pointed out that the land beyond the bridge was enemy territory and suggested turning back. But Lin spotted Duritz racing towards his castle. Karu warned that storming the fortress could mean facing lethal defenses. Fired up, In sought permission to clear the path, and Rain gave the green light. She summoned her divine sword, reducing the fortress to rubble. Rain reminded Lin that their choices today would shape the war's future. Lin, unshaken, affirmed she was ready. Reflecting on the group's immense power, she felt confident, especially in Nor, whose true strength, she sensed, was still waiting to be unleashed. The Emperor, finally stumbling back to his fortress, breathes a sigh of relief. Safe at last, or so he thinks. His terror quickly morphs into boiling rage as memories of his recent humiliation flood his mind. Stomping past his officials, he's asked why he reeks of mud. The Emperor, seething, begins to blame his soldiers for their defeat, despite their shiny high-tech gear. But before he can finish, an official spots something outside the window, and suddenly, the Emperor's bravado crumbles. Looming in the distance, heading straight for the Empire, is the Dragon of Calamity. The Emperor's brain does mental gymnastics. Wait, wasn't that thing fried to a crisp by a laser? Then it hits him. Saint S must have resurrected it. But here's the kicker. How is it being controlled? Turning on his heel, the Emperor demands to know where the beast tamer, Master Lude, is. The answer: Lude skipped town. Naturally, the Emperor leaps to the most logical conclusion: betrayal. He throws a tantrum like a toddler denied dessert. Randus, ever the voice of reason or patience, at least attempts to calm the Emperor down. But the Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, barks back at him, demanding Randus * do something. Rolling his eyes probably, Randus exits with a look that screams, "I'm so done with this guy." Desperation in full bloom, the Emperor commands the activation of Kronos, the Empire's top secret superweapon, to blast the dragon out of the sky. Cue the officials nervously pointing out that Kronos is still in the could destroy the whole city testing phase. But the Emperor, now officially out of his mind, kicks one of them across the room, because why not? They flip the switch, and the city plunges into darkness as Kronos locks onto the dragon's mana signature. The Emperor grins, convinced his most powerful weapon is about to save the day. Except, oops, the dragon parries the laser like it's swatting away a fly. The Emperor's jaw hits the floor as he watches the beam ricochet off course right toward the Empire's mana generators. Goodbye, defense system. Cue the Emperor pointing fingers at everyone but himself for the disaster, though he's the one who ordered the shot. The officials, they've officially had enough. One by one, they quit, leaving the Emperor alone to witness his empire going up in flames. Meanwhile, moments earlier, Nor and crew were riding the dragon toward the Empire when Nor sensed the laser. Knowing there was no time to dodge, Nor stepped up, deflected the blast, and then crash-landed right into the Emperor's castle. Meanwhile, back at Ground Zero, the Emperor finds himself surrounded by Randus and some disgruntled knights. The Emperor, incredulous, demands to know what's going on. Randus calmly explains that to save the Empire, they need to, well, off him. Panicking, the Emperor cries for help. But surprise, surprise, there's no one left to save him. Just as Randus is about to land the killing blow, Nor comes crashing through the ceiling, miraculously landing in the throne room. Randus, sword raised, asks Nor if he plans to defend the Emperor. Nor, ever the pragmatist, doesn't care much about the Emperor, but he's also not about to let these knights go full executioner on him. A knight pulls out a gun and fires at the Emperor, but Nor deflects the shot and, in the most careful way possible, lays the Emperor's head on the ground like a delicate porcelain doll. The knights, realizing they're up against a pro, all charge at Nor. But Nor, he swats them aside like flies. Randus isn't done. He argues that the Emperor's incompetence has sunk the Empire, and the only way to fix it is for the Emperor to bite the dust. One knight even throws a bomb to seal the deal, but Nor steps in again, gently kicking the Emperor out of harm's way. Now dangling from the wall like some bizarre decoration, Nor, ever the voice of weird reason, asks the knights why they're so keen on offing this old man. One knight points out that Nor has done more damage to the Emperor than they have, which, fair point. Randus, still intent on his mission, tosses a few more bombs at the Emperor. Nor, always one step ahead, catches him by the leg, once again saving him from imminent death. Then, with the wisdom of someone who just wants this nonsense over with, Nor suggests they just throw the old man in jail and let time do the dirty work. But Randus isn't having it. He explains that with the dragon and enemies closing in, killing the Emperor is the only way to show they've given up the fight. When someone chimes in with, "Hey, killing him won't be necessary, he can't suffer if he's already dead." Classic timing. Rain, ever the gentleman, thanks Nor for all his help but makes it clear he's taking over. Lynn's called in to patch up Nor from his little tumble, and the two exit stage left, leaving Rain to handle the Emperor's meltdown. Facing the knights, Rain gives them the all, "Hey, no beef with you guys, you're off the hook" speech. The Emperor? Not so lucky. In a desperate plea for mercy, the Emperor is stunned when Rain agrees, but with a brutal twist. Rain's forgiveness comes with a price. The Emperor must experience the exact same horrors he dished out. Crushed under rubble, burned alive, torn apart by beasts, just your standard Tuesday. The Emperor, understandably confused, questions how that's even possible. But always the team player, chimes in. "Oh, don't worry, I'll patch you up after each round of torture bingo. You'll be good as new. Oh, and if he passes out from the pain, Kara's got a special alarm clock for that." Rain, not a fan of torture for sport, clarifies that it's strictly business, he's just making sure the Emperor feels a fraction of what he caused. If anything, Rain's being downright generous with his creative punishment plan. Meanwhile, Nor's back on his feet, healed by Lin, but feeling a bit guilty about all the destruction from that little laser deflection incident. Lin, ever the optimist, assures him it's no biggie, the lasers only hit the mana generators, so no harm, no foul, just a few rebuilding projects. Rain, Karu, and S return, and surprise, war's already over. Blink, and you miss it. The Emperor has abdicated, his 10-year-old grandchild's next in line, and until the kid's ready, the knights are taking charge. Efficient, right? Randus, captain of the Oops, I Attacked You club, rushes to apologize to Nor. Nor, ever the chill guy, brushes it off, but Randus insists on making amends. Nor's still more concerned about the city's damage, but Randus tells him not to sweat it, it's all on the Emperor. Plus, there were 0 casualties, so it's just a cleanup job at this point. Nor, always the nice guy, offers to help with the rubble, but before long, the dragon's getting impatient, so they hop on and head back to the kingdom. Upon their return, the king is all gratitude and apologies for leaving Rain to handle the negotiations solo. He turns to Nor, ready to shower him with rewards for saving the entire capital. But Nor, not one for shiny things, waves it off. The king pushes, and finally, Nor asks for one thing: a better life for Rollo, a demonfolk kid with nowhere to go. Nor suggests the king help Rollo settle in the capital with a wealthy family, which sounds simple enough except for the whole Maria theocracy thinks demonfolk are enemies problem. The king's about to propose a different reward, but Nor's adamant, Rollo's security or nothing. The king, finding Nor's persistence downright hilarious, bursts into laughter. Cut to Rollo, who's having a flashback to the moment he was almost dragon food, dreaming of a life where he didn't have to suffer and could eat actual food for once. Fast forward, and he's waking up in a warm bed, sitting down at a dinner table with Ans, who tells him to dig in before the food gets cold. Rollo, still in disbelief that any of this is real, takes his first bite of non-rotten food and cue the waterworks. He cries, smiling through the tears, and declares, "The food is delicious." The scene cuts back to Nor in the capital of Clay's kingdom, and everything is completely destroyed. His heart sinks as he wonders whether the people he cares about are still alive. Through the chaos, he spots the Adventurer Guild building still standing like it refuses to fall. The sign is broken, so Nor wipes the dust away, and that's when the memories hit him. His old dream of becoming an adventurer rushes back, along with the painful reality that, despite training at every school for 3 months each, he couldn't unlock even a single skill. The guild master had told him he couldn't register without one. It's been 15 long years since then. We flash back to the past. A younger Nor goes to the sword school and begs Sig to train him. Sig is confused, but after seeing his permit, he agrees. Training is brutal. After just 1 day, Nor is wrecked, but he refuses to quit. Sig bets he'll last 3 days. Nor survives 10. Eventually, they train using a giant rolling boulder. Nor manages to block it, but it crushes his bones. Sig shouts at him to never drop his sword, no matter how much it hurts, because enemies won't wait. Nor picks it back up with burning determination, and Sig starts believing this kid might actually be special. Months pass. Nor still can't awaken a single real skill. With a heavy heart, Sig tells him to quit swordsmanship and find another path. So he joins the warrior school. The instructor, Dandel, thinks Nor is too weak, but Nor swears he'll become an adventurer no matter what. Training is insane. 1 day, a massive rock almost kills him, and Nor doesn't even try to run. Dandel saves him and silently admits the kid has guts. But after 3 months with no progress, he tells Nor to leave before he dies. Next is archery. Instructor Mayan expects him to fail instantly, so she tells him to hit a distant stick with a rock. He nails it in 1 try. Then again. Then again. She has no excuse left and trains him until every bow he uses explodes because he's too strong. Eventually, she kicks him out, saying that someone who can hunt super-fast thunder flash birds with stones doesn't need archery lessons. Then comes Thief School. Noor is decent, but he can never beat his instructor, Ku. During a trap exercise, everyone carefully sneaks forward, while Noor just sprints straight through, breaking and countering every trap like it's nothing. Ku is impressed and says Noor would make a great member of the kingdom's intelligence service, but not a thief. Next is Magic School. Bad news, Noor has 0 mana. His only hope is a dangerous mana resonance room. He goes in and practically lives there. After months, he can only cast a tiny flame. Then one day, he casually casts 2 flames at once. His instructor is shocked it took him 50 years to achieve that. But it's still not enough to make Noor an adventurer. Finally, he tries Priest School. The instructor asks if Noor had the Divine Blessing ritual as a child. Noor has never even heard of it. The instructor tells him to leave, but Noor refuses and simply stands there. Days pass, he doesn't move. Eventually his body collapses before his determination does. Sane rushes to heal him and finally agrees to train him, warning there's no guarantee Noor will ever awaken a skill. Noor accepts instantly. 3 months later, Noor only learns a weak low heal. Sane reluctantly tells him it isn't enough to become an adventurer. Noor leaves disappointed, but Sane secretly admires him. Noor can use healing magic even without divine blessing. Deep down, Sane believes Noor might have limitless potential if guided properly. A few days later, Noor disappears. The 6 sovereigns panic and hold an emergency meeting. Sane blames himself for not stopping him, while Mayan believes Noor is strong enough to survive. After arguing, they decide to search for him, and Sig prepares to go. Back in the present, Noor returns the guild sign to the guildmaster, who's relieved he's alive. Noor explains he turned back after hearing about the capital's destruction. The guildmaster sees how exhausted he is, and Noor admits he's had a wild day fighting monsters, getting blasted around, and now helping rebuild the city. The construction guild boss needs help, which is exactly why Noor came. Soon, Noor is working non-stop, clearing rubble like a one-man army. He's starving but refuses to stop. The king believes the real battle isn't over yet, but the kingdom will endure because they have strong people, especially the 6 sovereigns and Noor. While working, Lin spots him and thanks him for saving her before. His stomach growls like it's dying, so she gives him bread, which he devours instantly before jumping straight back to work. He glances at his sword and feels a little sad it hasn't seen much action deep down. He still wants to be an adventurer. Suddenly, a building collapses toward his boss. Noor casually parries the falling debris like it's nothing. The boss has no idea what just happened. Noor just shrugs. Then he keeps going, ready for whatever chaos comes next.